Texas Rangers versus Comanche Warriors. Agua Dulce Creek Ambush 1850. The soldiers watched in stunned silence as the man held it high a severed head, a grotesque trophy from the night before. Even the battle-hardened Texas Rangers turned away in disgust. The blood on their hands was fresh, but the true consequences of that night were only beginning. The Comanche would not let this go unanswered. What happened in the days that followed would forever mark the men who survived. Join us as we uncover the brutal truth. Subscribe to Native Legends and History Stories for the full story on May 29th, 1858, miles northwest of what is now Alice, Texas. Captain John Rip Ford led his company of Texas Rangers along a branch of the Nueces River. Their destination was their headquarters at San Antonio Viejo, near the U.S.-Mexico border on the Rio Grande. The men rode in formation, rifles ready, eyes constantly scanning the mesquite thickets that could conceal Comanche warriors. Captain Ford had just celebrated his 35th birthday. His nickname Rip reportedly came from his habit of signing too many death notices while serving as a quartermaster during the Mexican-American War of 18 for 6, 18 for 8. The Rangers under his command were mostly veterans of that conflict, all in their 20s and early 30s. Lieutenant Andrew Jackson Walker served as second in command. Benjamin H. Smith managed supplies and logistics. David Level was Ford's aide-de-camp, and Philip N. Luckett, a trained physician, served as surgeon. Despite their youth, each man carried the weight of considerable combat experience. From the brutal engagements of the Mexican-American War among the Rangers rode William Gillespie, a relatively new recruit who had also served in the Mexican-American War. Gillespie came from a family with a respected position in Ranger history. His uncle Robert Addie Addison Gillespie had served with distinction alongside Ranger legends like Jack Hayes, Bigfoot Wallace, Samuel Walker, and Rip Ford himself. The elder Gillespie had died 4 years earlier during the Battle of Monterey on September 22, 1846. He was reportedly the first Ranger to breach the barricade of the fortress on Independence Hill, where he was shot in the torso and died the following day. William Gillespie had joined the Rangers, determined to honor his uncle's legacy by establishing his own reputation in combat against the Comanche. The Ranger scout was a half Comanche, half Mexican man named Rocco Madrigal, who spoke Spanish, English, and Comanche fluently. He knew the terrain near the Nueces River intimately and was rumored to possess an extraordinary sense of smell that could detect enemies from remarkable distances, a claim many Rangers privately doubted, but none dared challenge to his face. Despite their scouts' impressive skills, the Rangers had spent most of the previous fall fruitlessly pursuing elusive Comanche groups across South Texas. They hadn't encountered any Comanche for months, a source of mounting frustration for Ford, and especially for the younger, battle-hungry men like William Gillespie. The monotony of their patrol had been shattered 3 days earlier. On May 26th, the Rangers were suddenly awakened by gunfire from one of their sentries. The target, shadowy figures mounted on several of the Rangers' horses, galloping away from the herd. After the riders ignored commands to halt, the sentry fired, striking one rider in the torso and causing him to fall. Until sunrise, no Ranger left the camp's perimeter, fearing ambush in the darkness at dawn. They discovered a mortally wounded Comanche warrior, no more than 16 years old, lying where he had fallen. The young warrior revealed before dying that he and his companions had intended to steal horses to gain wealth and prestige within their tribe. After his death, the Ranger scouted the area thoroughly, but found no trace of his companions, who had escaped into the brush. Captain Ford immediately wrote dispatches reporting the incident and requesting reinforcements. He selected Edward Burleson, Jr., son of a former vice president of the Republic of Texas, to deliver the message to Fort Merrill, the nearest military installation. Burleson returned with troubling news. Fort Merrill's commander, Captain J.B. Plummer, had dismissed their concerns. despite the clear evidence of Comanche activity so close to the Fort. Plummer seemed more annoyed about being disturbed by the Rangers' gunfire than concerned about potential danger. He reluctantly sent a small detachment of regular Army soldiers back to the Ranger camp with Burleson. That night, one of the regular soldiers wandered around the camp, displaying the severed head of the dead Comanche as a trophy. The sight disgusted even the hardened Rangers. Ford immediately ordered the regular troops to leave, describing the man's actions as deranged and beneath the dignity of soldiers. "We fight when necessary, but we don't desecrate the dead," Ford told his men afterward. "That's not what Rangers do." Now 3 days later, as they continued southward, their eyes constantly scanned the brush and horizon for potential dangers. Many yearned to reach the relative safety of San Antonio Viejo, where they could rest behind sturdy walls and process the events of the past 72 hours with the help of strong whiskey. But their headquarters remained many miles upstream, and whether the Rangers knew it or not, there would be no respite from violence and danger in their immediate future. The death of the young Comanche warrior had set events in motion that couldn't be undone. In Comanche culture, such a death demanded vengeance. Somewhere in the vast expanse of South Texas, warriors were gathering, preparing to exact a blood price from the men who had killed one of their own. "Captain, you think they're out there watching us?" Gillespie asked, his hand resting on his Colt Walker revolver. Ford's eyes narrowed as he surveyed the terrain. "They're out there. The question isn't if they'll come for us, but when." The Rangers rode on through the heat of the day, each man lost in his thoughts. The horses' hooves kicked up dust that hung in the still air, marking their passage like a signal flag to anyone who might be watching. The mesquite thickets on either side of their path could hide dozens of warriors, and every Ranger knew it. For William Gillespie, the anticipation of combat brought both excitement and apprehension. He had joined the Rangers to build a reputation like his uncle's, but now with actual conflict looming. He felt the weight of mortality. Would he live up to his family name, or would he simply die trying? He straightened in his saddle, checking his weapons for the 3rd time that hour. The column of Rangers continued south toward San Antonio Viejo, unaware that they were riding directly into one of the bloodiest confrontations between Texas Rangers and Comanche warriors in the history of the frontier. Their encounter with the young horse thief had been merely the opening move in a deadly game that would test every man's courage, skill, and will to survive. Though the Texas frontier was a vast, expansive territory not conducive to easy travel or communication, news traveled with surprising speed. Word of the young Comanche warrior's death quickly reached his tribe through the survivors of the failed raid on the Ranger encampment the Rangers had inflicted. A hard death on a beloved tribesman, and in Comanche culture, such an act demanded response. The Comanche, while often harsh and unremitting toward their enemies, maintained incredibly close family bonds and unyielding sentimentality, common among Plains tribes. Their ceremonial grieving process frequently involved self-mortification that could sometimes result in the death of the practitioner. More significantly, the Comanche operated by a principle of balanced retribution. Whatever degree they perceived themselves to have been aggrieved, they considered it their karmic duty to seek vengeance via an equal and opposite degree of violence. This cultural imperative meant that the Rangers' killing of the young warrior had triggered an unavoidable cycle of retaliation. The Rangers were acutely aware of the Comanche's propensity for combat. A tense anticipation pervaded their ranks. As they rode south, they had broken camp at dawn, and by mid-morning, their scout Rocco had spotted tracks of several unshot horses, a clear sign of a war party nearby. The hoof prints were fresh, indicating the Comanche riders had passed through the area only hours before. "These tracks are from this morning," Rocco reported, kneeling beside the impressions. At least 12 warriors moving fast. Ford and his Rangers correctly surmised that the Comanche intended to cut off their path Fort Merrill was the only military installation on the oasis. Between their current location and their destination, the Comanche would have been aware of the Rangers' likely route and planned accordingly with mortal danger near at hand. Thoughts of relaxing in a border cantina or reposing in warm beds at San Antonio Viejo quickly vanished, replaced by the immediate demands of combat preparation. Their first engagement occurred shortly after Rocco's discovery. A small party of Comanche attackers, likely young braves on a reconnaissance mission, fired upon the Ranger formation from a mesquite thicket man down. Gillespie's hit someone shouted. By 1850, the Texas Rangers, though only 15 years old as a formal organization, had already contributed significantly to advancements in firearm technology. The intervening time had seen the average Ranger outfitted first with single-shot pistols, then 5-shot Peterson Colt revolvers with removable cylinders, and now the most recent iteration, the 1847 Walker Colt. Samuel Colt had first designed his revolving cylinder pistol in 1836. While he didn't invent the revolving cylinder concept, Colt's ambition was to bring the idea to its fullest fruition. Initially, commercial interest was minimal, but the burgeoning Republic of Texas became an early adopter in 1839. The Republic officially purchased 180 revolvers, primarily for the Texas Navy, to combat pirates frequenting the coast and to defend against potential international incursions. When Governor Sam Houston disbanded the Texas Navy in 1843, the stockpile of unused revolvers became available for Texas's newest military experiment, the Texas Rangers. These Rangers, tracing their lineage to Stephen F. Austin's ranging companies of the 1830s, were a motley assemblage of combative and adventurous young men whom Texas employed as light-mounted cavalry. In the years that followed, both the Rangers and Colt's revolver would be tested through the refiner's fire of hard, frequent, and highly mobile combat engagements against cattle thieves, Mexican soldiers, and Comanche warriors. Colt developed a correspondence and eventual friendship with Ranger Samuel Walker, who provided crucial suggestions for improvements in letters. Often written near the front lines, Walker, a Maryland native, who arrived in Texas in 1842 via Galveston, had served under Captain Jesse Billingsley during an ill-fated invasion into Mexico. Captured and held as a prisoner of war, he narrowly survived the infamous Black Bean incident. Upon returning to Texas, Walker enlisted with the Rangers. Through his experiences fighting Comanche, Kiowa Apache, and in the Mexican-American War, he suggested several critical improvements, adding a fixed trigger guard, incorporating interchangeable parts for easier field repairs, and most significantly, adding a sixth chamber to the cylinder. The resulting Colt Walker revolver weighed 4.5 pounds, with a length of nearly 15 inches, firing a .44 caliber ball, with an effective range of approximately 100 yards. It was essentially a handheld cannon by the standards of the time. Rip Ford, who had served alongside Walker through many campaigns, including the Battle of Veracruz, remarked that the pistol was more powerful than the Bond .54 caliber Mississippi rifle, after witnessing its lethality at distance in combat. This isn't just a pistol, Ford had once told his men while demonstrating the weapon. This is the great equalizer. The Comanche can lose 6 arrows in the time it takes to reload a rifle, but with this we can fire 6 times without pause. The Rangers quickly adopted the new revolvers in 1847. Walker himself carried 2 into combat later that year. At the Battle of Huamantla, where on October 9, 1847, the young Ranger captain was shot and killed by a sniper. Though Walker had fallen, his legacy and the firearm he helped develop were keenly felt just over 2 years later on the New Aces River. Ford and the other veterans of the war in which Walker perished felt an extra measure of gratitude for his efforts. Now that they found themselves surrounded and far from home, the Walker cult enabled them to lay down a field of rapid fire that could overwhelm the rate of fire that the Comanche were capable of with their short high-draw-weight bows. The Comanche had long dominated the battlefield in terms of rate of fire and maneuverability, two key factors in any engagement. The horsemanship of the average Comanche warrior enabled him to fire while hanging off the side of his horse. Protected from counterfire by the animal's body, he could loose arrows from over the horse's back as well as under or over the horse's neck, all while shielding himself from counterattack. These skills weren't inherent to the Comanche. The difference lay in their lifestyle and training. Comanche children, both boys and girls, were taught to ride and shoot from an early age. Common practice drills involved picking up objects from the ground while riding at progressively faster speeds, as well as shooting live birds out of the air with blunted arrows for target practice. By adulthood, these skills were second nature, making Comanche warriors some of the most formidable light cavalry in the world. But the Rangers, despite their reputation as an ad hoc assemblage of killers for hire, were in fact disciplined, drilled professionals. They were not only superb horsemen, but incredibly accurate marksmen while mounted, as well as sound small group tacticians. The Rangers were well armed and mounted on some of the finest horses in Texas. A prospective Ranger wasn't allowed to join the ranks. With a horse valued at less than $100, approximately $3,900 in today's currency, the Rangers were indeed known for their decided lack of military discipline. In dress and decorum, they were free to wear what pleased them, from wide-brimmed hats and serapes to buckskin leggings and coonskin caps. But in combat they were highly disciplined, highly mobile, and highly dangerous. In 1850 they were essentially the only military force capable of engaging the Comanche on equal terms. The ambush at Agua Dulce Creek. After their initial skirmish near Rancho Amigosa, Ford ordered his men into skirmish lines, spaced a few yards apart, Colt Walker revolvers drawn and ready. They moved as quietly as possible, communicating via either hand signs or in hushed tones. The Rangers traveled another 4 miles up the oasis before coming within sight of the Comanche camp near Agua Dulce Creek. The Comanche, who had attacked them earlier, had disappeared to the north and had evidently not yet returned to their camp to sound the alarm about the Rangers' approach. This delay meant Ford's men possessed the element of surprise, and the captain sought to use that advantage to its fullest extent. With Ford leading the charge, the Rangers rode at full speed toward the unsuspecting war party's camp. The Comanche in camp, sensing the oncoming commotion of hoof beats and riders' exhortations, snatched up their weapons and made a desperate dash for their horses. Seconds later, the Rangers smashed into the Comanche camp at full force, riding at top speed and loosing howling war cries of their own. They barreled amongst the Comanche, shooting down any and all that they could. At first sight, no exception was made for the mounts of the Comanche, either, as several horses were shot at point-blank range to bring their riders to the ground. Over the course of the next few minutes, a brutal, close-quarters combat unfolded throughout the camp. Those warriors who stood to fight were almost all shot down where they stood, while those who retreated into the mesquite brush were pursued by mounted Rangers. When the dust had settled, Ford's Rangers had killed 4 Comanche warriors in the camp, and by Ford's account wounded up to 7 more. In the immediate aftermath, many of the Rangers were flush with the thrill of victory. Shouts of triumph and congratulations abounded. Then they heard the scrapes. In all the commotion, despite what any of them would consider a resounding victory, one of their own had been gravely wounded. Young William Gillespie had been riding through the village during the attack, bringing up the rear as a younger Ranger ahead of him. He saw a Comanche warrior attempting to flee the village on horseback. The warrior was brought down in quick succession by a shot to the neck and an additional shot to the back. Gillespie watched the warrior fall from his horse, presuming him to be dead as he rode past. Though mortally wounded, the warrior was not dead. He had managed to bring himself up to a sitting position after Gillespie had ridden. By seeing this, Gillespie wheeled his horse around in an effort to shoot the fallen Comanche. With his revolver, however, his animal lurched and caused the young man to misfire into the ground between himself and the Comanche. This momentary mishap created all the time the Comanche warrior needed. Drawing his bow one final time, and before expiring from his own wounds, he loosed an arrow that struck Gillespie under the rib cage, piercing his lung, mortally wounded. The ranger slumped in the saddle. Man down, Gillespie's hit. Someone shouted, seeing this. Captain Ford immediately called his rangers off the pursuit of the fleeing Comanche and organized them into 2 squads. One squad formed a defensive line to shield the second, who ushered Gillespie, still slumped in his saddle, to safety for a tense moment. The fleeing Comanche turned and seemed to ponder an attack on the now compromised rangers, who had just done them so much harm and killed for of their own. However, they were not afforded much time for contemplation, as the ranger squad holding the defensive position soon burst into a headlong attack toward them. The Comanche fled into the mesquite, leaving their wounded to the mercy of the rangers. As the rangers set up a defensive perimeter around their makeshift hospital, the sounds of Comanche calls echoed from the surrounding brush, mocking cries and war whoops that reminded the rangers that, while they had won this skirmish, they were far from safe. The warriors were still out there waiting and watching, perhaps planning their next move. Ford looked down at Gillespie, the young man's face pale and drawn with pain, then up at the darkening sky. They would need to hold this position through the night, tend to their wounded, and decide their next move at first light. The victory at Agua Dulce Creek had come at a steep price, one that wasn't yet fully paid. Double the watch tonight, Ford told Lieutenant Walker. They'll be back and they'll want blood for blood. As night fell over Agua Dulce Creek, the rangers prepared for a long vigil. The Comanche calls gradually faded, but no one doubted they were still there. Invisible in the darkness, waiting for their chance. The battle was over. But the war continued, as it had for decades across the Texas frontier, a brutal cycle of violence with no end in sight. The rangers transformed the recently captured Comanche camp into a makeshift field hospital. Despite their best efforts, Gillespie's wound proved too severe. The arrow had penetrated deep into his rib cage, causing catastrophic damage. In the succeeding hours, he died a slow, agonizing death as his comrades watched helplessly. Gillespie was beloved among his cohorts, and the fact that his legendary uncle had suffered such a similar, terrifying fate only a few short years before weighed heavily on the rangers present. The young man, who had dreamed of establishing his own reputation, had followed his uncle's footsteps all too closely, right to an early grave on the Texas frontier. Those not tending to Gillespie were sent to inspect and treat the horses, many of which had been injured in the fight. Others scouted the perimeter of the camp, remaining vigilant for any lingering Comanche. These scouts returned soon after with a young Comanche who had been injured in the fight and hidden in the brush. The boy had been shot twice in the arm, but much to the rangers' surprise and admiration, remained silent and stoic since being discovered. The young Comanche captive initially believed he would face summary execution at the hands of the rangers, following the typical pattern of frontier justice. When informed through translation that his life would be spared, he maintained a skeptical but compliant demeanor. Through Rocco's interpretation, the young warrior identified himself as the son of a war chief and revealed his peculiar nickname, Carnurado, or dead meat. The name, he explained with surprising pride, had been bestowed upon him because despite his small stature, he proved remarkably difficult to kill in battle. Like tough meat that breaks the teeth of those who try to consume it. This revelation earned him a measure of respect from the battle-hardened rangers some time before the sun rose. William Gillespie passed away. Captain Ford, who no doubt bore considerable grief and guilt, having long known the Gillespie family, ordered the young man's body tied to a mule. The Rangers then made their way to the top of a small hill, near Agua Dulce Creek, where a grave was dug. What Ford himself described as a sad but simple service was held, with prayers offered and scriptures read, all the while the young Comanche captive, who had been brought along in tow, stared silently at the open grave. Like most Comanche, he would have been all too aware that the Rangers had a reputation for exacting harsh revenge on their prisoners. He believed that after the death of their comrade, the Rangers now meant to kill him in retribution. He was, however, informed through Rocco that this would not be the case. Ford had decided that the cycle of vengeance had claimed enough lives for one day. "Tell him we don't kill prisoners." Ford instructed Rocco that's not how Rangers fight. Gillespie's body was then lowered as gently as possible into the grave and covered with rocks to dissuade wolves and coyotes. The Rangers moved on, heading again towards San Antonio Viejo with one less Ranger and one more prisoner in tow. Rip Ford and many of the men present that day would go on to legendary careers with the Texas Rangers, their names recorded in the annals of Texas history. Though the fate of Carn y Muerto, the young Comanche brave taken prisoner, is lost to history, the fate of the Comanche people was far from determined. Their reign as lords of the southern plains would continue for at least another quarter century. The clash at Agua Dulce Creek was just one of countless violent encounters that defined the Texas frontier, a place where cultures collided with devastating consequences, where young men sought glory and often found death, and where acts of cruelty existed alongside unexpected moments of mercy. The Texas Rangers and Comanche warriors were bound together in a brutal dance of conflict, each side fighting for their vision of the future, each leaving their mark on the land they both claimed as their own. For Captain John Rip Ford, the lesson was clear but painful. In the struggle for Texas, victory always came at a price, too high to celebrate. As he led his men away from Gillespie's grave, the weight of command had never felt heavier. The violent clash at Agua Dulce Creek strips away romantic notions about the American frontier, revealing the brutal reality of a land contested by courage and blood. At Native Legends and History Stories, we deliver history without filters or embellishment. Subscribe now to discover authentic accounts of America's past that schoolbooks never taught you.